Hi everyone, I'm Raga De Silva, your host for Older Queer Voices. Today we are having a conversation about the current moment in India where the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Amendment Bill 2026 has been introduced and is being widely debated. This proposed amendment appears to challenge one of the most important principles established by the Supreme Court in the 2014 NALSA versus Union of India judgment, which recognized transgender people as a third gender, affirmed the right to self identification, and clearly stated that transgender persons must not face discrimination and must be treated with dignity and equality. What is being discussed now is a shift away from self perceived identity towards processes that may require verification or certification by the state. At the same time, the government has said that such changes are intended to bring clarity and ensure that protection and benefits reach those who need them. This has created an important and difficult tension between autonomy and oversight, between self definition and state validation, and between legal frameworks and lived realities. We also have to recognize that gender diversity in India is not new. Communities such as the Hijra community have existed for centuries with their own systems of identity, belonging, and recognition. So today, we are asking what is happening to the right to self identification in 2026, what this means for real lives on the ground, and how we understand law, identity, and dignity in this moment. Today, we have with us two incredibly powerful voices from the community in India, Zainab Patel and Harish Iyer. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for giving us this time to discuss something which is so critical.
Thank you, Raka, for initiating this conversation. I think it's very important. Thank you so
Thank,
much.
thank you. And we really want people not just in India, but also the Indian diaspora outside of India and the other people in our community and allies to listen to this conversation and understand what's really happening in India. It's there's so much happening in the West, but in India itself there is so much happening. So we want to make sure our platform will provide that opportunity to speak as clearly as possible. So before we begin, can I please ask you both to share how you identify yourself? Zainab, we start with you.
Raga, my name is Zainab Patel, and my pronouns are she and her.
Thank you. And Harish?
My pronouns are he and she. I am a gender fluid person, a non binary person, and which also falls under the trans identity, the trans umbrella.
Brilliant, brilliant. We're looking forward to this conversation. So, Zainab, can you start by telling us about the NALSA versus the Union of India judgment and why and what it was established for, especially in terms of the right to self identity and the protection from discrimination?
Um, Thank you, Raga. What I'm actually going to do is start by saying this slightly differently.
Sure.
So, NALSA was not a judgment. I believe, and for those of us who went to court, we actually believed it was a moment of truth because for decades in India, although trans people and the various indigenous identities um, that were there in India, they were visible, they were out on the street, they were living on the fringes of society, and yet the state and the state mechanisms treated us trans people like we were a problem to be managed. But with our petition, along with NALSA, the Supreme Court turned the situation around and said, no, you are citizens with rights and equal citizens with rights. That was the core of our petition. Do trans people have equitable rights in India? And what did it establish? Three very clear things. The first is that gender identity is deeply personal, and that self identification is a fundamental right. It's not a favor, it's not an entitlement, and certainly not a concession given by anyone. And this was a right that we fought under Article 14, 19, and 21 of the Indian Constitution. Second, that trans people are entitled to full equality, that is, socially, legally, economically, and not just by virtue of symbolic inclusion. We talked about, and the judgment gave orders on real time inclusion measures, etc. And the third, which is my favorite part, it said that dignity, the Supreme Court of India, in its two judge bench judgment said that dignity is non-negotiable, even for trans people. So what it basically means is that you do not get to respect me after you verify me. My rights exist even before the fact that you may choose to verify me or no. And if I were to say this with a bit of humor, it is that NALSA, which stands for National Legal Services Authority. So we took one government department to court to fight the government of India. So it was probably the first time that the system looked at us and said, okay, you tell us who you are and we'll catch up. And that's when the broad definition came in. And that also looked at a specific change where from suspicion to trust, that's what made NALSA really revolutionary, not only in India, but across the world.
Sure, Zainab, that's so clear. But tell me, did that really work? Did that work? Was that applied in day-to-day life for the transgender community?
It started off. I think what we did is where there were no doors and windows that were existing, we managed to create an entrance. That entrance is something that people constantly go back and refer to in India. So, NALSA judgment, along with the right to privacy judgment, the Navtej Johar judgment. Oh, and remember, this came in even before homosexuality was decriminalized. So the principles that they were upholding were also used in the Navtej Johar judgment, which decriminalized homosexuality almost 4 years later.
Excellent. So, Harish, from your perspective, then, how does the principle of self identification established in NALSA, for instance, apply to non binary identities? And do you feel it fully includes your experience?
See, NALSA included my experience because it didn't need a validation from someone else. It needed my assertion on my body and what I wish to call myself. It didn't leave it to any third party, any third person, whether it's a state or whether it's a medical authority or anybody, to decide how I feel. And it is and it is the truth, Raga, that why would anyone, okay, the whole question of many people are saying, oh, what, but that simply means that anybody could get a certificate. It's true that anybody could get a certificate. But the truth is also, why would anyone choose a life where they would be discriminated, where they would be treated badly, where they'll have to prove themselves to other people, they might get disallowed in certain spaces. No one really chooses that kind of life. And it's not without any scrutiny. We also, when I got my transgender certificate, I also went through a lawyer. I got an affidavit done. I went through various processes to finally get my transgender certificate, right? And it leaves now. Now, who knows my body better? Who knows your body better, Raga? Do you know it better, or do I know it better? Does the state know better on how I feel, whether I feel within me, regardless of how I look or what body organs I have? Whether I'm a man or a woman, or is Zainab a man or a woman, or whether you are a man or a woman, how, how can anyone just base that on bodily anatomy and not look at the psychological makeup and what people assert themselves as? So NALSA gave me the right to be who I am without asking me any questions that would invade my privacy, any questions that would be detrimental to my own mental health. It doesn't ask me any questions. It just has a procedure where you can go and you can avail of a transgender this thing. It had a certain set of procedures. It's not so easy that you just go to the shop and get yourself a card. You have a certain set of procedures that you need to follow for you to get that card.
Harish, on that point, the transgender certificate that you talked about, I know there's a process. Can you just explain the process, and also where do you use it? Who asks for it?
See, I'll tell you a very simple thing. The process is simple. You need an affidavit. You need to go. There's a district magistrate who issues the certificate. You need to have an affidavit. You need to apply. There is a website. You can apply through the website. It's all a seamless online process. And then once it goes to the district magistrate, you'll get the certificate online. Sometimes it takes time, and it is a laborious effort to actually put in your name, put in details, and all these things. Now, where I'll tell you, I'll answer this question a little differently. I'll tell you where it has helped me personally.
Sure.
Like, for instance, now you can see previously when I came to your show, I had shorter hair. Now I have longer hair. I wear a lipstick, and sometimes I wear some paddings on my chest to look more like a woman because I feel more like, right? So I went to this to the loo in Lucknow. Okay, I walked inside the loo. Okay, I walked inside the women's loo, and they stopped me from walking in because they could possibly see that I've got and that I could possibly male. So I just told them that I have this transgender certificate. I walked in. The next time I walked in, so that time I didn't, I was not stopped at all. Previous to that, when I didn't have the certificate, I walked inside the male loo, a men's loo. And when I was peeing in the men's loo in the urinals, there were two security people who walked in, and in the same airport, two security people walked in and they asked me, "Madam, आप यहाँ क्या कर रहे हो? Madam, what are you doing here?"
Wow.
Okay, so this is one difference. So I could just use my card, and I could say that, you know what, this is my identity. You don't have the third restroom, so I'll use the women's restroom. I'm dressed in this outfit. So I had some identity over there. Besides that, it also gives benefits on various. It provides us from discrimination. We are considered under trans people are considered under the other backward classes, and there is some affirmative action over there. Educational institutes, the chances of us, Zainab and I are anomalies. We are educated, we are speaking well, but there are times when, but we have gone through our own share of bullying. It took me 3 years. It took me like 5 years to complete my 3-year graduation, right? So, but we persisted and we ensured that we complete our education. And not everyone is able to do that, regardless of what class or what caste or what religion that we come from. We face the same kind of discrimination just because we assert ourselves a little differently from what the majority does. So, affirmative action in educational institutes, various other things as well, which are very positive and progressive steps. We never had to, because when we were there, by the time Zainab was fighting for all of us, I think by that time we already had finished our education, but we were fighting predominantly to ensure that the next generation doesn't have to suffer.
Sure, sure. So, Zainab, I'm just going to stay on this point. So, do you think that if somebody questions you going using the wrong loo, I will give that as an example, the wrong toilet, or they think you're in the wrong place, and if you show your ID card, do you think the general public really understands that? Apart from, of course, security who may have been trained at airports, what about a general person, a woman saying, "Oh, you've come into my toilet, and I'm sorry, who are you?" And they question you. Does that card help? And what has been your experience around it?
Uh, I mean, Harish has been lucky if they have been able to use their card to access the washroom. Um, First of all, the card is in the form of a certificate. It's a large A4 size
Yeah.
document that is there, and the basic idea was when this card was launched, the certificate rather, The transgender ID is just part of the larger certificate. It basically was supposed to link identity with entitlements from the government, like pensions, scholarships, etc., so on and so forth, and also supposed to help you get through some of the barriers around accessing public spaces, um, security, airports, train stations, etc. I can say this with 100% confidence that not everyone has been able to use that.
Yeah.
Much less gain access to a toilet, because the toilet is not generally gate kept by a security guard. There is only a washroom attendant at best.
Mhm.
It is the general public accessing these washroom that create problems. And what Harish narrated as a matter of fact, that when they were trying to use the washroom, um, Harish had to mention that they have a ID card and they should be allowed to use that. At the same, so the women don't want trans people in their washroom. You go to the men's washroom, you're looked at suspiciously, whether whatever your expression may be. I'm not talking about identity here, I'm talking about expression, the way you dress, the way you walk. It could be mascara, lipstick, um, dressing up as a woman or a man, something like that sort. Um, that unfortunately is still governed by people's perception. And there are some people who are sympathetic. The airports tend to get slightly more sympathetic. I wouldn't say 100%. And it is mostly with accessing bus stations, etc., which could get problematic. Also because the number of people accessing them is large. Having said that, whether the card or the certificate actually allows you or permits you to use that, it created a sense of security, it created a sense of identity, and it gave us a little more validation in public spaces. I would take this card or the identity certificate as that. How people have been able to use it to navigate spaces is a different story altogether. There are some people who have been able to use it, some people whose identity cards have just not been recognized even by security. They said we don't know this,
Yeah.
it's not in the list of businesses that we kind of allow to go by. So
True.
it is a double whammy, but I would suggest and speak a little bit from experience, saying that it did create a sense of validation.
Sure. And India is so vast, right? I mean, in your metros, you can still have this kind of training and understanding. But as you go into the smaller cities, I'm sure that there is that lack of awareness. And I'm sorry that you all have to go through all this. So Zainab, just going to come to you on this current situation right now. So can you share with us what is happening currently and what is being proposed by the government, and why is there so much of upset?
So what is happening is not subtle, it is direct, it's in your face, and it's outright exclusionary. What the government has brought in to this amendment, or called the 2026 Amendment to the Persons Protection Act, they are moving from a framework of self identification to one that hints at verification, certification, or maybe even an approval, because here the district magistrate will set up to the chief medical officer a committee. Now it is moving through in from an individual to an institution for verification, certification, approval. As of today, technically, there is no reason why your ID card or certification should be denied. Technically, there is also a timeline for processing them. A lot of the states and districts have not been able to meet that timeline because there is a major backlog in cases. And imagine in a country with billion plus people and about 500,000 people who were counted 16 years ago, we just have about 40,000 people sign up for this identity certificate. So it's a fraction. It's 10% of the total numbers counted in the census. So you can understand it's not widely popular. It's not that people have gone ahead and say, if there are 5 lakh people counted, there are 50 lakh people signing up for the card. So there's also a bit of fear mongering that's happened. Second thing is that, and I want you to think about this. So from self identification, there is human work involved in giving an affidavit, a sworn affidavit saying that, say, I, Harish Iyer, or let me say my name, like my name was Ernest Narona before I changed my gender. And so I said, I, Ernest Narona, son of so and so, would like to now be known as Zainab Patel, daughter of so and so, and I be given a sworn in affidavit and I identify as a trans person. If the trans person has gone through any affirming procedure, it could be something like hormone replacement, laser therapy, two complex surgeries. They have not put a count on it. So, not like you'd have to do top and bottom, etc. If you've gone through any of that, you can also change your gender from like male or trans to female and vice versa. So, that was the only condition. Now, everything to even self identify as a trans, you go to a committee, which is a medical committee. Now, this is directly contravenes what is happening internationally through the World Professional Association on Transgender Health, WPAT. What is being said in the International Classification of Disease, that being a transgender person is no longer a mental illness. It is removed from gender dysphoria and taken to a chapter on sexual incongruence. So, what the doctors are trying to do is still trying to prove that you are mentally ill.
Yeah.
And that is why they need to sit together and pontificate. Otherwise, what would be the purpose? If the international if doctors in India have not been able to catch up what's happening internationally in the international classification of diseases, etc., then it's a huge concern for those people advising the government. We need a model like this. Now, the government in its advisory around the bill actually states that they're talking about bringing in clarity. How can the government clarify who's a trans person and who's not? It is for the trans person to clarify whether I identify as a trans person or as a cisgender person. And when you're talking about benefits, you're saying, oh, we want to be targeting benefits. It sounds very reasonable. But look at the huge gap. There is nobody rushing in like 50 lakh people signing up for the certificate and getting. I don't think Harish and I have ever got any benefit from this card. Many states have not even implemented any welfare measures for the community. So I don't know why this fear mongering is there within the government that we have to get it to the real transgender person. Now, who are the real transgender person? That opens up a different can.
Sure.
The real trans persons are only those who belong to these four communities. That is um, the Hijra community, the Kinnar community, the Jogta Jogappa community, those who identify as intersex. Now, what existed separately as for intersex, now they have clubbed the distinct understanding of intersex under trans people. So, so for me, it's creating a hodgepodge. It is bypassing anyone who identifies as trans masculine or who do not belong to these socio-cultural communities. And imagine we have 36 plus states in India, so many identities, even socio-cultural, to pick up four,
Shocking, no?
which is shocking. And it also takes the entire relationship. My identity as a trans person is for first and foremost with myself, then with my family, people who I get intimate with, or people who I choose to be with, and then with the state. Here, the state has changed the entire balance.
Yep.
So why? And I just finished that.
Sure, sure.
For me, it is like asking, what are you really? It is asking me, what are you really? Are you male? Are you not male? Are you a hijra? And being a hijra is a socio-cultural identity a lot of us don't want to identify. I'm talking about communities at large. Then the second thing is, do you have proof of this identity? There is nobody is given us a certificate to become a hijra or a kinnar, etc. So I don't know where they have got this idea that people who belong to this identity, because then you are bringing in people from the community to also gatekeep your identity. Someone will have to validate. So if I say tomorrow you tell me I'm a lesbian, and you have a fraternity of lesbian women determining you whether you are a lesbian or not, how does that work?
That was very well explained, Zainab. In fact, I'm going to stay with you, and Harish, I'm going to come back to you in a bit. I want to understand from a Western point of view, the concept of being transgender in the Western world. They don't really understand the concept of hijra or the kinner community. Can you just kind of shed some light on that, Zainab?
Okay. So this is one of those times where India refuses to be simple in its outset. And honestly, that's where the beauty lies in diversity. The Hijra community, it's not just about gender, it's about traditional traditions, it's about kinship, and it's a whole different social ecosystem. A lot of trans, so all Hijras are trans persons, definitely. Mostly about 90 odd percent, 95% of them are persons who are born or who were male identified as male sex identified at birth and take on this identity. There are also some intersex persons as well who are part of this community. Now, what has happened is that the word hijra itself is a Persian word. So it while the traditional terms that people have adopted and used in India have been kinnar, uh, the hijra word actually comes from the Persian word hijra, which then comes from the Arabic root hijra, which means person who's undertaking a journey, the journey of identity. So in the olden days, when there was largely no acceptance, where if you had to survive as a person who's genderqueer or trans, the only kind of refuge was the ghetto that these communities provided. That's why people would go and join. They joined in for kinship, they joined in for social recognition, they joined in to earn a living. So certain traditions and trades were earmarked. The Hijra community, which I belong to, traditionally danced at childbirth or auspicious events like marriage, setting up of a business, etc. And they people believe they a lot of them romanticize the idea that these people are born with special powers, the romanticizing of the other. So when you have people like this believing us, and Raga, nobody calls us when someone is dying or dead or to pray over. We are only supposed to go there where there is auspiciousness, not death or decay or dying or sickness. So they created this ecosystem where we are invited only for a brief amount of time in the midst of people and then sent back to where you belong, on the fringes of society. That is what the Hijra community. So it evolved as a socio-cultural group, made its own ecosystem, made rules that govern them. Like any social hierarchy, they would make rules that govern them. Would you believe if I told you that until about 10 years ago, uh, a lot of the Hijra trans women couldn't drive a bike because there was a fine attached to it. So we were not supposed to be doing things which were quote unquote masculine.
So
So the
who? Sorry, sorry,
community,
sorry. I'm going to interrupt, Zainab. So who put that fine on?
so it was a set of rules that traditionally got passed on by people.
No, no, within the community or
Within the
okay,
community,
okay, sorry.
it was a matrix that was governed by the community rules that were made. And see, it also stemmed from the fact, Raga, that that did not allow for social inclusion of people. They wanted to remain on the periphery so that they could look exclusive. The more you mainstream, the more people realize that you're something like them. There is no enigma around you. So you lose that special. So I think all of these. So as a hijra, when I sit back and think of those days in the past, I feel that these were also some of the things that people put in place to keep them away from mainstream society, so society could keep on giving them money at some point of time.
Interesting. Interesting. These are things that we had absolutely zero understanding of. I don't think too many people understand that, Zainab. I'm going to come to you, Harish. One is, where do the non-binary people fit in? Gender fluid people fit into this? And also, I want to understand is, when Zainab talks about the hijra community, and I know you said that transgender people, non-binary people, are come under the transgender category, if you could call it. So how does that whole system of hijra fit into the non-binary space as well, if you can share?
See, the Hijra community is a different socio-cultural community per se.
Right.
When it comes to non-binary people, we again we often think that everyone fits into neat boxes. Okay, a non-binary person or a lesbian means a lesbian would look like this. A gay man would look like this. A trans person from the Hijra community, the fact that Zainab and Lakshmi, who are petitioners of the NALSA judgment, that they speak English, many people are like, oh my God, they they speak English and she belongs to the Hijra community. So because there are some boxes that everyone fits into, and some people don't fit into those boxes. The non-binary people are people who don't neatly fit into the boxes of male or masculine or feminine. We just don't want to fit into any box. Or and gender fluid people are people who fit into, I sometimes feel like a man, I sometimes feel like a woman, sometimes I feel like both, and sometimes I feel like neither. What I feel like at what time is something that I will decide for myself, what I know, not the world which knows about it, right? So that's the basic this thing. So the Hijra community is a socio-cultural identity, mostly, as Zainab rightly said, people who are so like every time when I never had food on time in my childhood, my grandmother used to tell me, "You, if you don't eat food on time, we'll send you to a hijra." Okay, so it used to be even so either they are treated like devis or they are treated like devils. You add another L to that, right? So there was no in between. They were just not human at any point. Okay, and that's the way that culture has developed in normal in day-to-day families, so to say, where they're told that, oh, you know what, you need to kind of attach a certain value of devotion or divinity to them, but at the same time, you can't associate and be friends with them because they're not a part of society at large, right? And the Hijra community also became a safe haven for a lot of people. So what happened if, of course, I belong to a family which is very supportive, but many families are not very supportive. And when they're not supportive, when there's familial violence, where do you go to? You go and find refuge in a community which is sitting in the fringes of society, where you are also treated as an outcast of society. So you see some semblance over there, and you find refuge in those places. So that is the identity and the Hijra community has a great role to play, so to say, where they have assimilated so many lives which were thrown to the fringes, have been assimilated and built by them, given a sense of family and identity and a social structure by communities like that. Now, what the bill does right now is it recognizes only those communities, because again, it doesn't recognize communities like the Khwaja Sarai community. There are several iterations of every region has a certain community. Like for instance, in Canada, you get two-spirit. So you have different kinds of communities in Pakistan, in West region, where you have communities which practice Islam, right? So you have different kinds of communities that are formed across the length and breadth of India. You recognize only few, and you don't recognize the others. So you're not creating a silver lining for these communities. You're actually sowing seeds of division in the average minds of an average non-binary trans person. When you look at only these communities being named over there, and of course, all these communities have got something to do with Hinduism. Okay, that's another connotation or that you hear of. So you kind of associate all of it with that. And there is and when you look at non-binary people who don't fit into neatly into these boxes, you find them completely left out of the whole system per se.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you, does it mean erasure as well when you get left out?
It means that if I consider tomorrow I will not be a trans person, I can't call myself. My card would be invalid. My certificate would be invalid if this happens. So it is erasure.
Yeah. Okay. So Zainab, were you consulted? Was anyone from the community consulted, or it was a random thing that the government decided?
I I don't know. They got this information to an extraterrestrial source because none of the people that Harish, I, and so many other people know of didn't even know why this bill was introduced. Whether it came in from a need expressed by the community, whether it was a need expressed by the general community, whether it was a need felt by the bureaucrats implementing it, we don't know. I mean to say that um, what prompted the government to bring in a bill? There are reports in various leading news dailies, including the Hindu, saying that there is a statutory body which was developed under the current act in 2019. It's called the National Council for Transgender Persons. There are community representatives and there are bureaucrats in that. So the community representatives say that they have not been consulted on this act. They didn't know what problem. So if the community in general, I'm speaking for a large group of people, feels that nobody knows what led to the intelligence around this and why this act was brought in. So I don't know. Maybe there are people who the government consulted because I would like to believe that, but this largely no one was aware. In fact, when it came out, we thought it was a prank. We thought it was a prank. We thought it was a
Okay.
joke. Someone has just put that in. And they said, no, the government cannot do something like this, at least till now. And then suddenly we hear this.
And you're one of the petitioners with the NALSA versus the Union of
Oh, but that
India.
doesn't matter. I could have been a petitioner, but I mean to say that um, what really impacts is that who they consult. Even if they say there's a group of 20 trans people who this bill is wholly affecting, came to us, petition, we took their viewpoints into perspective. I would like to believe that. But if the apex body constituted by the government, community representatives among them saying that we are supposed to provide you with policy insights and none of us know about it. There are a couple of members who've gone to say that if this bill is not withdrawn, they will resign. But I mean, these are of course extreme reactions. The NHRC, the National Human Rights Commission Special Monitor for LGBT persons, um, Gopi Menon, has also asked that this bill be withdrawn, etc. But the question is that I'm sure there has been some intelligence inputs why the government brought this. It's just that it's not there in the forefront at this point in time.
Sure. And what is the general reaction from the other side, from the government, when there's so much of noise right now on social handles that I see at least? So are they reacting to it, or they're just silent at this point, Zainab?
I think the fact is that they would have anticipated some amount of noise being made. But I don't really think that governments got into giving press releases or conference on why did they introduce a bill. At least I have not seen that. I think the last time I saw this kind of interface was when the farm bills, the farm laws came into discussion. That was the only time the government was giving some pressers on it. But largely, none of the bills being introduced have ever got into a question and answer. And yeah, that is the thing that's concerning for us.
Sure, sure. Harish, I'm going to come to you. I saw a very interesting letter that you were part of with Srikar the Rainbow Parents, brought into perspective a completely different thinking about parents and about children. Can you share a bit more about that, please?
I think now parents are really concerned, really concerned about the fact that I'm one of the founding members of this Sweetcard Rainbow Parents. I'm possibly one of the only two people, me and Sridhar Rangayan are the only two non-parents in that group. And the fear is palpable over there. This means that suddenly their children are going to be left in a world which doesn't recognize them. They're going to be left in a world where there is going to be many of them. Let me tell you, Raka, they have moved from countries like America and come to India thinking that India is more safer for trans people in comparison. We were a beacon of hope for a lot of people, at least when it came to what it looks on paper. I mean, it's not to say that there is no discrimination or it's all hunky dory right now over here, but at least the blatant homophobia and transphobia that people see in some parts of US, where it's discussed, bathroom laws and so many things that are discussed. I know people who have moved back to their country and their parents have called them back to the country, saying that we are here and this place is safer, please come here. And so the fear is palpable, the fear is real. So it's flooded with messages. I had to switch off my WhatsApp to get onto this meeting right now because the moment there is someone who utters something or there is some update about the law, we know that the law is going to happen sometime in the week of 23rd. They're going to discuss that. So suddenly the news was out and people are really concerned. They're concerned about two, three things. One is about the future. What does the future hold for their children in this country? They are scared about the fact that they self-identify. Many of the children self-identify, and many of them they've been accepted by their family. Not that they have not been accepted by the family, but they have not been accepted. Now suddenly they are scared about how people are going to react, how people are going to use this as a tool to attack them, saying that, oh, you are invalid or you're not required over here. Because this also led to a lot of a wave of with all the hate that came in, also there is also somewhere a layer of protection when you have something enshrined in the form of a judgment or in the form of a law. And when that becomes negative, so to say, it has the negative repercussions also. So they are contemplating hate crimes increasing. So they are looking at a lot of these things right now itself, and they're really concerned. And
Yeah.
they wrote a letter to the Minister of Social Justice, who moved this bill in Parliament, Minister of Social Justice Virendra Kumar, and they wrote it to him and his wife. They said, we are parents and you are also parents, so why don't you understand our plight? And that's why it touched a lot of souls, because that letter is really going viral because of that, because it really was from parent to parent.
So, are you getting a positive response from the general public as well?
See, generally, mostly people are really concerned. I think the biggest positive reaction that they could get is by standing as allies to the community. I don't know unless this is some diversionary tactic that they get this bill to divert from something bigger that's going to happen around that time. I don't see a reason why they would do something like this and without consulting the community at all. Positive reactions all over. We have film stars and even opposition MPs and everyone who has been championing. I just saw Saket Gokhale from who's my college friend, who's a Rajya Sabha MP, posting something on Twitter. So people have been posting, people have been sharing views. I wonder. I just wish one thing, Raga. I wish that each of these people who stand against us, I and everybody for that matter, at least has one non-binary or a trans child, because that's what the Swikar letter also says. I wish you be blessed with a trans child so that you know how it feels like to have a child who's a little different. And I think an LGBTQ child is what we'll wish for every family to have, because probably when the shoe bites the person who's wearing it. So really, when they have the child and when they realize what their children are going through, probably they'll realize.
Yeah,
Probably they'll realize. Or if they get worse, then we will always be there. But the major part of this bill is that it criminalizes social work. Like if say there is a family which is being abusive to their trans child, and if they find refuge in anyone's house, now that would be there would be a criminal charge against the people who are refugees, who are the ones who are providing refuge, right? So it criminalizes social work. It criminalizes. I mean, India has been known as Vasudeva Kutumbakam, right? We are the big giant family of the world.
yeah.
We consider the whole world a family, and when someone is in distress, it is the principle of Hinduism to actually get up and help that person. In fact, principle of every religion. But since we are in India and we are speaking about this particular government, I think it is the principle. So we are going against tenets of our own religion. We are going tenets against the tenets of our own constitution, which stands for plurality, which stands for unity in diversity, which stands for the respect of every person, regardless of whether that person happens to be the only one different person. Even that one person who's different, regardless of whether they're intersex, trans, Muslim, Dalit, whatever,
I
whatever
agree.
they are, person with disability, whatever their identity may be, their voice is important, and that's what our constitution, the Indian constitution, stands for. They
I
are fine.
agree with you, Harish. I totally agree with you. I'm just going to, because we're running a bit out of time, but been a great conversation. Zainab, I'm just going to, both of you, of course, I'll come to you and say, what is it that you want from our listeners, our viewers? We've got so many people that we can reach through our platforms. What would you like, Zainab? What is the message?
I think the first thing is that uh, the victory that we got in 2014 and the lobbying that resulted in the 2019 Act being passed by the Parliament has been through sheer hard work of communities. We don't want this new amendments to come and ruin years of our work. We want the agency of our body, our autonomy to remain with ourselves, not with some committee, not with some department. I don't think anywhere in the world do you have a committee like this that decides somebody else's identity for them. So for me, this kind of model is making me a third, fourth, fifth class citizen of India and demonizes me, forces me to go underground, forces me to go back to thinking whether I will ever be living as a equitable citizen in India. So if you have friends and family in India, you have relationships that can work with politicians, especially those in both houses of the parliament, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, the lower house and the upper house. If you can reach out to them, and when, as in when bill gets presented for discussion, ask meaningful questions, that would be great. But what we would actually like people in the audience to do is to sit back, to not sit back, to stand up with us today, because what is happening to the trans community across the world today is not going to be restricted only to this community. It is slowly going to reach on to other members of minority groups and of the LGB spectrum as well. So while we are there, we are visible and we will bear the brunt of it. We also want you to stand as families, as friends, as allies, and generally as a human being who doesn't wish something bad happen to another human being.
Thank you, Zainab. Zainab, there is a petition that is, there's a
Yeah.
link for a petition that we can all sign, right? I'm just going to say it out loud just for our listeners. If you can sign this petition, www.change.org/p/OPPOSE dash the dash amendment dash redefining dash transgender. Just search for transgender identity in India, and you should be able to find this link. And please sign the petition. The more of us signing the petition, the better in solidarity that we will stand with our trans community in India. Harish, from your point of view, what is the last message what do you want our listeners and viewers? How do you want us to support you?
I think this has started a mental health crisis already. So if there are trans people whom you know of, non-binary people whom you know of, hold them close to your hearts and tell them that it doesn't matter. You see them for who they are, and not for what any any letter from any government that's going to define who they are to you. So at least you, in their immediate friendly friend circles and their family circles, if you stand up with them, I think that's going to do a great deal of difference for them. Also, if you know, if you can follow a few handles, um, you there is a reject trans bill 2026 on Instagram. There is my own. I'm a part of. I'm also constantly sharing. Ayer Harish is my handle. So
IYER for those who do.
IYER HARISH.
Thank you.
IYERHARISH is my handle. So do connect. Sweetheart the Rainbow Parents is also there on Instagram. You can just look for it and you'll find it. And amplify all these voices. If there is something that you can do at the ease of your keyboard, just amplify all these voices as much as you can, um, and in the comfort of your home, or while you're sitting on your phone, please amplify these voices and just see all the voices that are mentioned over there. Make a video, maybe. Write to us. We will give you some material that you could make a video about, and we'll ensure that you go viral too. If you support us, you scratch our backs and we'll scratch yours. So we'll ensure that you go viral. So do send us. You can send us collaborate requests as well. Zainab is also there as Radhika Nandgiri. You can send Zainab. You can send me. You can send Reject Trans Bill. You can send them the handle, and we will amplify these voices, because what we need now is a collective stance. We want the governments and the authorities to know. And if you know any MPs, or you can just get their email IDs, just chat GPT it, and they'll give you the email IDs of these MPs. Write to them, write to them a letter, and tell them how you stand with people who stand with the community and who are part of the community, and stand
Thank
for
you.
self-identification. Mhm.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, Harish. This has been a really heartwarming conversation. I've not only learned so much, I'm just going back to reflect on this whole thing myself, which I think all of us need to sit back and reflect. We need to, and I love what you both said, is to stand up for our trans community. It's so important. And not just because it may happen to us, because we need to stand up for respect, dignity, and love. It's as simple as that. So NALSA versus the Union of India was a recognition, as I understand, of dignity, of selfhood, and of the right to live without discrimination. It is affirmed that identity is not something that needs to be granted by the state, but something that exists within the individual and must be respected. It's as simple as that. But today, as we look at the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Amendment Bill 2026 and the conversations around verification and certification, we're being asked to reflect on a very real question. Are we strengthening that right? Or are we slowly reshaping it in a way that places limits on self identification, for one thing? At the heart of this is not just a legal debate. It's about people's lives. It's about dignity. It's about whether someone can exist as they are without having to justify or prove who they are. So the question we're left with is this: if identity is about selfhood, dignity, and belonging, then who should truly have the power to define it? Thank you so much, Zainab and Harish, for bringing such depth, honesty, and clarity to this conversation. I mean, you were both very open, shared everything, and I wanted to ask questions that a lot of our listeners ask us, and we are never able to ask, and we got an opportunity to do that today. So thank you for sharing openly. And thank you to all our listeners and our viewers for this conversation, for listening to us. And do share your feedback. Do share this video as many times as you want, and comment if you need to at theviewsroom@gmail.com. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you again next time.